Hello everyone, I'm Alex and I'm a PhD student at the University of Kentucky. I work at the Narrative Intelligence Lab under the supervision of Dr. Stephen Ware. In this presentation, I want to talk about an emotion model for strong story narrative planning. One of the first papers that talk about emotional planning is a paper from Jonathan Grach in 1999, where he talks about how an emotion model can be adapted to narrative planning because of all the concepts they have in common. For example, agents, actions, goals, and expectations. This paper builds on our previous work, which proposes a strong story, state-space narrative planner with intentionality and belief. What our previous model lacks is how characters should be able to emotionally react to different situations. Before I start, there are two important notes about my emotion model. It is an emotion model for strong story systems where the narrative planner first satisfies author goals and then attempts to explain character actions. The emotion model is also independent of the domain actions, which means that we have no information of the details of the domain actions, including their preconditions and effects. In this paper, we use a simple example. Tom wants to have medicine, and he has 2 coins. The merchant sells medicine for 1 coin, but Tom can also make medicine using herbs. Tom believes that there are herbs in the forest, but in actuality, there are not. There is a bandit in the forest that may steal Tom's coins. The merchant also sells swords for 1 coin, and if Tom buys a sword, he can't be robbed by the bandit. In this model, characters can form expectations based on their beliefs and their beliefs about the others. For example, Tom expects that he could collect the herbs in the forest to make the medicine, even though there are no herbs in the forest, and Tom also expects that the bandit could rob him in the forest. In our model, we represent character goals by a utility function. A utility function maps a state to a number. There are several constraints for a plan to be considered valid, but the one that I want to focus in this presentation is that for a plan to be valid for a character, they must believe that it will increase their utility. By incorporating the emotion model into narrative planning, we change this definition to this. A plan is considered valid for a character as long as they believe that that plan could trigger a positive emotion for them, even though it may not necessarily increase their utility. This is a part of the state space of the example story. In the next slides, I'm going to break it down to focus on certain parts of the state space. So an example plan for Tom is for him to go to the forest and collect the herbs to make the medicine. Another possible plan is for him to go to the town and buy the medicine from the merchant. Again, a solution to a narrative planning also has several constraints, but this is the one that I focus here. A solution to a narrative planning is a sequence of actions that maximizes the author's utility. An example story is where Tom goes to the forest, but he realizes there are no herbs there, so he goes to the town and buys the medicine. Another story is where Tom goes to the forest and gets robbed by the bandit. It is possible for characters to expect plans that may decrease their utility. For example, Tom could expect that the bandit would and could rob him if he goes to the forest. Our previous model did not keep track of these kinds of plans, but using our new definition of a valid plan, it is possible for characters to proactively anticipate the actions of other characters. For example, Tom could go to the town and buy the sword before going to the forest. I will later explain why this is a valid plan. Our model is inspired by the OCC emotion model. The OCC includes 22 emotions that correspond to 3 different categories: the standards of agents, the consequences of events, and the liking of objects. In this paper, we focus on the consequences of events. When considering the consequences of events that have actually happened, a character may feel joy if their utility increases or sadness if their utility decreases. For example, when Tom goes to the town and buys the medicine, he feels joy. But when he gets robbed by the bandit, he feels sadness. We could also consider the consequences of prospective events. Prospective events are called unconfirmed when they haven't happened yet, confirmed when they actually happen, or disconfirmed when they actually don't happen. If a character expects a plan that could increase their utility, they feel hope, and if they expect a plan that could decrease their utility, they feel fear. For example, here Tom hopes that he could go to the forest and collect the herbs to make the medicine himself. He also fears that by going to the forest he could get robbed by the bandit. If a character expected that a plan could increase their utility and it actually does, they feel satisfaction, and if they expected a plan to decrease their utility and it actually does, they feel fears confirmed. So here Tom feels satisfaction because he hoped that his utility would increase by buying the medicine from the merchant, and it actually does. When Tom gets robbed by the bandit in the forest, his fears become true. If a character expected their utility to decrease to a specific number, and after a series of events they no longer expect that to happen, they feel relief. On the opposite side, if they no longer expect that their utility could increase to a specific number as they expected before, they feel disappointment. Tom feared that their utility could decrease to 0 by getting robbed by the bandit, so he forms a plan to go to the town and buy a sword. This makes him feel relief. This is an example of a plan that was not possible in our previous model, because not only this plan doesn't increase Tom's utility, but it also decreases his utility. However, it makes him feel relief, and because relief is a positive emotion, it is considered a valid plan. As a result of this, we can generate more stories than our previous model. If Tom goes to the forest and he realizes there are no herbs there, he no longer believes that he could make the medicine himself, so he feels disappointment. Finally, when considering the emotions of two characters towards each other, there are 4 combinations based on the increase or decrease in the two characters' utilities. For example, when Tom buys a medicine from the merchant, they both feel happy for each other because their utilities increase. But when the bandit robs Tom, Tom feels resentment towards the bandit, and bandit feels gloating towards Tom. In short, we model 12 emotions out of the 22 that are known as the set of well-being emotions. How does the space of all valid plans change after including emotions? This circle is the set of all possible plans in classical planning. For example, the merchant may hand the medicine to Tom without any reason. That is why it is necessary to only allow agents to take actions that help them achieve their goals. Let's assume this subset of all plans in classical planning represents the plans that include intentionality. To that, we also add a set of plans for character expectations. The valid plans in this set only include actions that the agent believes are possible. An example of a valid plan in this set is where Tom expects to go to the forest and collect herbs to make medicine himself. Even though those actions are not actually possible, it is a valid plan for that character. Based on our previous work, the intersection between the intentionality and belief represent the set of believable character plans. In this paper, we also add another set, the set of character plans that trigger a positive emotion. It is possible for a plan to increase a character's utility and making them feel joy, but it is also possible for a plan to make them feel relief, happy for, or gloating, which don't necessarily increase their utility. Based on our new definition of a valid plan, we believe that this subset represents the set of all possible valid plans, where the agent believes the actions could trigger a positive emotion for them. An example story that was not possible with our previous definition is where Tom goes to the town and buys a sword. As I mentioned, this plan decreases Tom's utility, but it also makes him feel relief, and therefore it is considered a valid plan. To evaluate our model, we conducted 2 experiments. In the first experiment, we showed the example story to the participants in different sets of steps. After every set of steps, we asked them what Tom would feel, and they had to choose between these 6 emotions. We asked the participants 7 questions, and they significantly agreed on all 7 questions. For 2 questions, they significantly agreed that Tom would feel 2 emotions rather than 1. In the second experiment, we asked the player to play in an interactive game in which they would play the role of Tom. There were also two other characters in the interactive game, that the player could view their goals and expectations in their thought bubbles. Only one of the two characters chose to express their emotions in their goals and expectations. To show that the new stories that are generated based on a character feeling relief, we prompted the player that they may or may not get robbed by the bandit in the forest, even though the bandit would never rob them. A significant number of players chose to go to the town and buy the sword first before going to the forest, which shows that they acted on their fears to feel relief. After the experiment, we asked the participants to choose the character they found more believable and realistic, and they significantly preferred the emotional character. The players also had the option to help either one of the characters by giving them a coin or a sword. Not only the players chose to help the emotional character, they significantly stated that they would have helped both characters if they could, but they chose the emotional character. In conclusion, we proposed a domain-independent emotion model for a strong story multi-agent planning that improves character believability, allows generating more stories, and can cause empathy in the player. In the future, we hope to include the rest of the 22 OCC emotions in the model.